Hello guys, and welcome to this video where we'll be taking a brief introduction at our coding environment, the Visual Studio Code, or in short, it's sometimes referred to as just VS Code. Now, let's just first dive into the meat and buns and sort of get an understanding as to what this thing is, how it works, and also how we can set it up and have it work with us to build some cool websites and so on. So anyway, this is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to first dive down into what is Visual Studio Code. We're going to be looking at some of the main features and how we can operate with some of those. We're going to be looking at how it has that cross-platform support. We'll take a look at how to navigate using that Explorer, the integrated terminal, the debugger, the integrated source control, and the extensibility through extensions. Now, of course, all of this may sound quite confusing, but it'll make more sense as we progress through. So what is VS Code? What is Visual Studio Code exactly? Now, Visual Studio Code is a free, lightweight source code editor. Okay, now you'll probably be like, okay, Nash, I understand the part about the free because it's free and the lightweight. But what on earth is source code? Now, if you remember, during the very first module, you saw that we spoke about something called source control, where you're building something and you have to basically write all your instructions for the computer in a file. And that is called the source code. Now, there are certain times where you're going to be writing different files, but they're all making one thing. And that's what that Visual Studio Code does. It's a whole environment that focuses all on just building, making it all easier for you. Note as well, the Visual Studio Code can be used for this entire thing of writing your source code, also testing it and so on. So it has that in mind, and you can also customize it to how you'd want it to look and some added features that you would like using those things called extensions. But things will make a whole lot more sense as we progress through. So, what are the main features of this VS Code? Now, take note. The VS Code is an IDE. It's an integrated development environment. An integrated development environment, it's just one little application where all your development stuff are all put in. They're all integrated into one thing. So, you've got that code editor, that little area where you can write your code. You've got a place where you can manage all your files. You've got a place where you can test your code. Your code editor even makes it easier for you to see your code and all that. So that's what we mean by that integration, that integrated development environment. So this VS Code that we are talking about, it has some of the best features which you will see as we go. It allows you to do that whole idea of testing and writing your code sort of side by side. In this way, it will be easier for you to see where you've made mistakes in some of your code and where everything is okay and so on and so forth. Alright. Now, VS Code is cross-platform. What we mean is it works on multiple devices. So if you're using a Windows, it works perfectly for you. If you're using Linux, it works for you. If you're using Macintosh, it works for you. So it is that cross-platform support that we are referring to. Okay, now I am quite sure at this point that in the previous level, you had taken a look at how to install that Visual Studio Code. Although we did not really take a look as to how to use that Visual Studio Code. But let's progress through. Now we get to work and get our hands dirty using that Visual Studio Code. Okay. Now, VS Code looks quite something like this if you're working with it. Just to give a little bit of a backstory on this, this is a little snapshot of a project on VS Code. Someone's writing some code here in a language called JavaScript, and here's your Explorer and so on and so forth. But yeah, the VS Code has a full-on code editor. So this is what you would see on this part of the VS Code, where all the code is written and all that. And you'll notice that it makes it a whole lot easier to see because it has something called syntax highlighting. which looks something like that. Okay, it highlights some of your words and they are all in different font colors like so. Okay, and it also has this idea of sorting out your code, things like your functions in your code. You find that they're sorted like that, which makes it a whole lot better. But nonetheless, there's also this wonderful thing called IntelliSense. And IntelliSense is this idea of when you write in your code, it can almost figure out what the remaining part of it is. For instance, here this line of code says let book equal, and then he just wrote QEU, but the IntelliSense can sort of figure out that one of the possible options is question or Q micro task, question email, and so on and so forth. So it can sort of figure those things out as you go. And it's a matter of hitting enter on your keyboard and it can somewhat finish it off for you. Now, on the left side of it, right there, that is where you're going to be able to see your Explorer. This is where you can browse all your files that you are working in for that project. So if you look here, there's some folders which you will note that they've got a drop up and drop down arrow next to them. Those are folders like so. And then those with symbols like that, those are individual files like so. Okay. So that is your File Explorer. You can use this place to create files, to save files, delete files, open files, and so on. Okay. And then if you scroll down through, note that that first icon, that is the icon for the Explorer. And then if you use that second icon down there, that's how you will be able to access the search, where you can search for certain keywords within your files, or even file names for that matter. Okay. Then there is the integrated terminal. The integrated terminal, there it is right there. So that's your command line interface. It's kind of similar to your Explorer. You can do very much the same things, except that you've got extra power. You can run applications. You can do a whole lot of things using the terminal. We're not going to take a look as deep as to how to operate that terminal yet. That will be another level of its own. Then you'll find the source control when you click over that. Remember, the top was the search. The one below that is your source control. Your source control is what we use in order for us to push some of our code over to GitHub. So it's Git compatible for that matter. So if you note here, it's sort of mentioning some changes that happened to the project, and it's mentioning the folder where the change happened and the file where those changes have been made. And then you can make some commitments and push it all over to GitHub, like so. Then there is the integrated debugger, which you'll find with that icon. The idea of the debugger is just to test your code, so you can see if it has any errors that are logical. So perhaps maybe your code was supposed to add 1 to some variable, but you added it to the wrong variable, for instance. Well, the integrated debugger will sort of take you step by step, sort of outlining what happens to every function, what happens to every variable as you go. In this way, you'd be able to identify where your errors lie. Now, a big thing to now take note of is when it comes to Visual Studio Code, you have the ability now to make some extensions to your VS Code to extend its capability over what it already has. For instance, you want that extra support with a language called C or C++. You can install an extension for C or C++, or you can get an entire extension pack that looks like that. Once you have that installed, then you'll have those extra capabilities for you to work with it. And that is very much it. Now, let's get our hands dirty and explore through some of the functionalities of that VS Code. So, here's my desktop. Now, in my desktop, I've already got my VS Code installed, so I'm going to search for it through like so. So there. Now that I'm here, oops, my bad. So now that we're here, let me just get rid of this. Okay. So when you start off, you'll find perhaps you've got something that's of a similar environment to mine. Okay. So let's take an overview of some of those things. Okay. So there you've got your File Explorer, and there's a whole lot of parts to this. Now, let's just close this first. Okay, let's go back to the desktop. The first thing you need to know is how to open VS Code from an origin, from a specific place where you'd like to work. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, so the best thing for you to do, maybe on your desktop, is you might just want to start off by creating a folder where you're going to be doing all your projects. Okay, we just close this. Okay, so we're just going to make a folder here, and on this folder we're going to be doing all our Visual Studio projects. So I'm going to create a folder and call that folder projects, like that. Okay, so there is it, project. Then in this folder, I'm going to go into that folder. Of course, this folder is empty, but now I'm going to open up this folder in Visual Studio Code. So let me close off the original VS Code. So in this folder, I'm going to open it up in VS Code. So I'm going to right click there. And now that I've right clicked onto it, I'm just going to show the entire thing. If you have your VS Code opened properly, you should be able to see this little option that says open with code. You're going to click on that one, and then it will open up. Something like this. If it gives you a prompt asking you to, asking if you trust the folder or not, you'll just say yes, I am the author, and so on. But nonetheless, here we are. So you will notice on the Explorer it says projects, which is actually awesome. So we've opened this folder. It's now available in the Explorer, and anything that we do, we'll work on it here. So all my projects for the entire bootcamp, I will be working on them like this. So every day I am making some contributions to my work. I may want to just start off going into the projects folder. Okay, now let's see how we can operate the projects folder. Suppose I would like to create a folder in here for this. Let's say I've just started a new project. Okay, let's suppose I'm creating a home page, for instance. Maybe this is one of my capstone projects. Then I can make a folder for it. And then inside that folder, I'll have all my work in there. So just like that. Now, how do I create files and so on within this folder? Well, to do this, you right click on that folder and you can click on new file. You'll notice it goes right below that home page. Then we can give the file a name. Let's call that test me. Okay. And you may as well need to give a file extension for this file. Maybe it's a text file. Then we'll give it a txt. Maybe it's an HTML document. We'll give it a .html. Maybe it's a JavaScript file. We'll give it a JS. Now, the extensions differ depending on what language you're working with or what file you're even creating. In this case, let's suppose this is an HTML file. You should note that the icon should reflect accordingly as to what file you are working with. So ideally, I've got this project home page, and then I've got that testme.html file. And then in here, I can write all my code. Okay. Then I can be like, yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. Boom. Okay. Now you will notice when you've made some changes to your file, you'll notice a little dot right there. This means that you have not saved any changes to your file. So what you need to do is use the Ctrl S on your keyboard, and then that will change and reflect those changes accordingly. You will notice on that original folder that we created, the projects folder, there's that folder homepage and there's that test me file. So everything sort of reflects into your PC. Now that's out of the way, I can make more stuff onto this. For instance, if I right click on there, I can make a folder as well there. Let's call it some folder. Like so. You will notice it reflects exactly that here. Just like that. So we're using this and we're using that. But for now, we're not going to use the terminal. You may notice that the terminal is not there. But if you need the terminal, of course, you can go over on view. And while you're on view, you will notice that terminal option. Then you'll get access to the terminal like you saw in the slides. But for now, we're just going to close this because we're not going to be using it as of yet. The search that we had mentioned is right there for you to use. The source control, you will find it here. However, you will notice that The source control only works once you have a Git repository. But in this case, we do not have a Git repository. We will look at that in a future lesson. Your debugger, you will find it there. And if you want to extend your capabilities on your VS Code, you can do it using that extension. Then you can search for the extension that you would like. Suppose maybe I would like a specific extension. Maybe I'm working with Python. Go over there and make sure that it's installed. However, I've already installed this, so there's not much changes I can do. Maybe I need the test runner for Java. Unfortunately, I have that. In fact, most of these I already have. Let's suppose maybe we would like Microsoft Edge tools or Markdown Intelligence or something. I can just hit install for that and it would perform the installation. Or I would like this special thing called the Docker. I would install it. But as we progress through some of the levels, they will be outlined what you would be needing in terms of the extensions. But for now, we're just sticking to the bare basics. Do not worry about these two if they are not on your VS Code. Those are extra extensions that I have, like the Remote Explorer and the Chromium. These are just extensions that I've got. But anyways, hope that makes more sense. And then next, we will dive deeper into our VS Code and work with it. See you guys in the next one.